Thanks for joining the Ivanti ELA webcast series today. Welcome to part one, IT Asset Management. With me today is Brian Hoskins, Director of Service Management. Good morning, Brian.
Morning, John.
You can see that we have 5 busy weeks coming up here. You can go to our website, ncsi.us, to sign up for the remaining 4 as well. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Well, first off, what is an ELA? It's an enterprise license agreement. With all the recent acquisitions, Ivanti's line has exploded exponentially. So the ELA was created so you can get more value out of it, kind of like a buffet instead of a la carte. We can go to the next slide there, Brian. You have 2 options. It's either an enterprise ELA or a pick 2 ELA. There's some great benefits like true forward licensing. That's a 20% buffer. It adds licenses without the additional need for procurement cycles, which we're going to be talking about. Another benefit is the Ivanti Cloud and extraction reporting. Brian, do you want to go ahead and explain the recent acquisitions and go a little bit deeper here?
Yeah, so, with all the changes that have happened at Ivanti in the last, 3 years, a lot of customers used to purchase what was called secure user management, and total user management was kind of all that Landesk had in terms of all of the different products and different components. Well, with AppSense and Heat and Res software and Concord and extraction and a lot of different acquisitions and mergers that Landesk Ivanti has done over those years, is a new option for a lot of customers now is the Ivanti ELA. So the Enterprise License Agreement allows for customers to either pick 2 from all of these 5 pillars or get the what we call the Unified IT ELA, which is all 5 of the pillars. So if you look at it, we've got Unified Endpoint Management, which is your traditional Landesk management suite, but also brings on User Workspace Manager from the AppSense acquisition, some other Endpoint Manager components that are added in. Also, when they look into the security, you're starting to talk about not just the patch and the traditional things that we've had in security, but you're bringing in app control and patch for servers, which is more of a defined patching for servers from the Shavlik acquisition. Looking at IT service management. Now, Ivanti's had service management, as you've kind of gone through for a while on that. Now you can go through and pull in some of the details now with the Heat acquisition. Service management's all on a brand new platform, everything from there. And then identity management with, the Res acquisition and doing full automation, identity management details, all of this kind of stuff from there. So it goes through and manages all the kind of configuration and details along those lines. But let's jump in more into the IT asset management side of it. Well, it's kind of showing here the pick 2. You can go with any of these 2 or the Unified IT, which we'll go through and bring in all 5.
Kathy's asking about data analytics and B2B capabilities. Will there be data analytics and B2B capabilities for licensing reconciliation? Okay,
so Ivanti is in the process of kind of making a change to that. So as you can see in the ITAM pillar is still the asset intelligence, or what used to be called data analytics. That is being moved, and the B2B connectors are all being moved into the Ivanti Cloud that are called data services. And so the data services will be taking all of those kind of functionality as it's built out a little bit more. It does some of that as you kind of go through, but it certainly can do lots of those kind of details from there. Right? So when we talk about the ITAM pillar, we have the IT asset management pillar. So from an asset manager side of it and all the different details, that's built on the new Ivanti Service Manager platform. Now, some customers can have both, right? Some customers can just have asset if they want to, and other customers can just have service. If you have the ELA, right, you have access to both the Service Manager and the Asset Manager platform all together. It's integrated. It's all on the same instance, all the same configuration from there. Then we can go in and do the license optimizer. As I talked a little bit about some of the mergers and acquisitions, the Ivanti Asset Manager and Service Manager are now built on what was the Heat cloud, and the platform that's there. Now, it's not just cloud, that is on-premise as well, but then you can also go through and have the license optimizer, which came from the Concord acquisition, and within that is also the data center discovery component and the desktop discovery that we'll go through and do. If you don't have Endpoint Manager, it can do the discovery of all of the clients as well. So you've got License Optimizer subscriptions for clients and for servers for your data center side of it, and then Asset Manager, Asset Intelligence in all of those. Let's go ahead and jump out of slides, and let's go in to talk about some product as we go through. So right here, you'll see that I am logged into the Asset Manager side of it. So from the Asset Manager, right, this is kind of the foundational component and building all stuff. We get the discovery, and then we feed Asset Manager with all that discovery information, right? So we don't want to spend a ton of time talking about the foundational components, because that's the Endpoint Manager. We've got other webinars that are going to talk about that, but that will feed into our asset repository. So here you'll see Asset Manager with all of the kind of roles and components that I have. Everything's going to start in this asset repository, right? So this is where all of my assets are going to be, where all of the details of that is going to kind of go through and work with the information on there. So for example, if we were to open Computer 89 in here, Computer 89 is about an asset that I have. It's assigned out to a particular user. It's kind of gone through its life cycle, out from an order through procurement and through delivery, receipt, and put into a stock room. And then we've got, assigned out to Becky. So let's talk a little bit about this asset, and then I'm going to go through some of the other components that are here. I don't want to spend a ton of time. If anyone wants a more customized and in-depth demo, we can certainly schedule that. This is just to kind of give you an example of one of the pillars that's in Service Manager as we go through. So as we look at this, you've got, this asset is a subtype of a desktop, right? And we've got different subtypes from servers to virtual clients to virtual servers so that we can manage all of the details around there. We've got the discovery information where Endpoint Manager is going to populate all of this kind of configuration, discovered values, all of the details from there. Also would be able to populate the installed software. Now, I said that I have both customers that are on dedicated asset and others that are on an integrated. So my discovery is all sitting over here on my integrated. This one's both service and asset together, but since we're focused just on asset here, I'm just going to show you the asset alone instance from that kind of configuration. So you would see then it would populate software and different details. I'm also able to see some of the user assets that are here and some of the configuration associated with those. I can see some relationships, how they go, and relationships from contracts to other assets, and I can link upstream and downstream different components from there. The contracts that are applicable to this asset, as well as what vendor we purchased it from. When we go to the finance, we're able to see what PO we used associated with that. We can go through and look at how much we paid for it, what kind of purchase was it? Is it a lease? Is it a full purchase? Is it some other kind of component that's there? Did we buy it through a PO or did we get it through a company merger? Any of that kind of stuff. And then it also will do straight line depreciation out of the box. You might have noticed over on the details, we also have a barcode. There's a barcode scanner that you can get, Android-based barcode scanners. It's not an Android phone for a barcode scanner. It's a dedicated Android device that will do that. Ivanti is working on an Android-based phone and an iOS phone to do that. They're having some problems with the cameras not being quite detailed enough on those devices to be able to be barcode scanners. And then you can see here, you've got some the audit trail, everything that happens in the history of this asset, from when it was inserted to when it went through and had, asset serial number, it was brought into our corporate office storeroom, and then it was set in assigned to Becky, had all of the different use case policies set to it, so the history keeps track of all of that as it moves between different assets from the different component that's there. All right. Now, on the very beginning, there was a catalog item associated with this particular asset. This is our standards catalog. So these are the assets that we allow for people to have within the organization. And our standards catalog, we can go through and say all of the different components that we have from here. So for instance, if I go over to the product catalog, we would be able to see I've got some couple of different Dell Inspiron laptops, a desktop, PowerEdge server, ThinkPad, as well as a MacBook Pro, right? So these are the different products that we can support and have from our standards catalog. If we were to go look at that desktop standard, here's all the details around that particular product catalog item. Here's where we purchase it from, our recommended vendor. We also have other supported vendors, but if CDW is out, we can also order it from Dell. You would notice that it has different pricing based on which vendor that we happen to go through on there. You see, I've got internal cost, external cost, what team owns it, when does this particular product catalog expire so that it wouldn't be able to be requestable at that point from our different users. Then we're able to track every asset of that product catalog out there in the organization, whether it's assigned to an individual like Computer 89 was, or whether it's in stock, meaning it's in one of our storerooms waiting for somebody to request and us to be able to deliver that computer from there. We're also able to see any active orders that we have. So you see I've got 20 of them on order with CDW. It's at a status of approved, but we haven't actually received those quite yet. We also have the stock levels. So at the different corporate office locations that we have stock rooms in, we can go through and see all of the details. So you see I've got this asset in my US West corporate office, first floor. And so there's one asset on there where we would be able to fulfill a request from somebody at the corporate office for this, and we can assign it. And you notice I can assign it right from the catalog. So if somebody's requested a new desktop, we're going to fulfill it with Computer 90. I can just stay and say assign to user, and it would go ahead and apply that out to them. John, I want to just do a quick pause and see if you have had any questions from anybody yet.
Yeah, we do. Taylor's asking about extraction. Is that part of the pick 2, or is extraction included in both?
So extraction is included in everything. So if you're a customer, you get extraction. Whatever product that you purchase, you get the ability for extraction to connect to that. So if you get the pick 2 ELA, you get extraction for those 2 products that you're in there. If you get the unified IT ELA, you get enterprise version of extraction, which gives you unlimited read licenses and gives you the top 10 connectors. So things like SolarWinds and Active Directory and some of the other components that are there. So you always get extraction. If you get the unified IT ELA, you get the full enterprise version of extraction with the top 10 connectors.
Okay, and then what about integration with procurement systems? Is there any integration or plans for that?
There are plans. There's a bunch of different connectors that Ivanti is working on building for the asset manager, right? And then there's connectors to, the CDWs of the world, so we can actually get it from the manufacturer. Connectors are being built into, the Great Plains and the SAPs of the world and that kind of stuff in there. So I don't know where each individual connector sits in their backlog and when they're going to have those done, but they are building all of those kind of purchasing connectors. Now, it can be built today using the APIs and that kind of stuff available. So it's not that we can't do connectors today. They're just not the official connectors from Ivanti. It'd be part of a professional services engagement.
Okay, and then you mentioned Computer 90. Is that auto-assigned, or can the business assign the number?
No, this is the company assigning. This is just a name. When we go back to computer in the asset repository, there's a computer name, then there's the asset tag, and then the serial number. So these 2 values would be obviously set by each company. Serial number would be obviously set by the manufacturer along that. But
they can customize the computer name?
Yes.
One more question. Would we be able to track machines in a replacement cycle, i.e., when is the machine due to be replaced, and what machine did it replace in the past?
Yes. So you could do those. You'll notice here I've got a purchase date, an asset age, a usable lifespan, and then when that's going to expire. So I would be able to kind of see all of the details along those lines from there. Okay, let's kind of continue on. A couple of things I want to talk a bit about. Because we need to integrate with lots of purchasing systems, we have a whole purchase order section. You'll see here I've got a purchase order. Let's go look at this $21,000 one from some desktops that we've ordered. Here you'll see a purchase order, who it was submitted by, all of the information about that purchase order from a cost and invoicing totals, as well as vendor details on here. So I can see that this purchase order was used to get 20 assets, and then here's my 20 assets from this particular purchase order, right? So this was all brought in, and then we went in and linked the assets. So the invoice was brought in with integration over into those other kind of purchasing systems, and then that information was linked up to that kind of scenario. Next, kind of wanted to look at contracts. So contracts are a way for us to be able to track, not just the contracts that we have, the hardware, the software, the maintenance, the license, all the kind of details associated with those contracts. So if we were to take a look at this first contract that I have from Dell, right, the contract with the contract name, the governing law, all the different details of that contract. I have who is part of the contract, what role do they have within this contract. I can see what contract the vendor is with, what other contracts that we have with that vendor would be able to show up here, as well as what purchase orders have we used to purchase on this particular contract. And then the real details of the contracts are in what we call the contract line item, right? So you'll see here when I go to do a contract line item, I have entitlement, which is a ITAM word for license, right? An extended warranty, a lease, a maintenance, an NDA, a purchase, a renewal, a service, a support, or a volume purchase. And which based upon whichever one of these I select is going to bring up different options. Now, when I look at this and say I'm going to do a new entitlement, it's going to be very simple in terms of what it pulls to this level, right? And I can go through and say we're adding in a new entitlement. Here's the cost. Here's the effective date. Here's the end date. But if I go through and look at one of these, let's just look at some maintenance on some servers from a line item perspective. Once we go to the detail, you're going to see there's a lot more information on here. Because this is a maintenance, right, we need to be able to track renewal information. Is it renewable? What's the renewable amount? When do we want to get a notice around those renewals and the details around the configuration of that information? What assets does this maintenance on the servers apply to? What is the initial cost? What is the renewal cost again in there? What's the termination details? If we're going to do this, what kind of notice do we have to give from a termination perspective on here? And then throughout the system, there is the concept of a vendor scorecard. Every time we have interactions with a vendor, we can fill out a scorecard and say, how was that interaction, right? Was it good communication? Was it good pricing? All of that kind of information is then tracked. And then back on my home screen, I have a vendor scorecard dashboard that I can actually see each one of my vendors and how they're performing against all of the communications and interactions that we've had with them. And then they can be in a good standing or a poor standing based upon what we have from that.
A question about that. Would installing the client on an endpoint also bring in that information?
When you install the client, you're going to get the inventory of that particular thing. The contracts and that kind of stuff is unfortunately a lot of manual entry. Unless you have that somewhere in Excel or something like that, then we can import that.
Okay, and then a question from a few minutes ago about data analytics. You were demoing something there, and they said, how does this compare with Landesk data analytics, and is data analytics still part of the program?
So data analytics is called asset intelligence, right? So asset intelligence is part of the program. Like I said, it's being converted over to data services in the Ivanti cloud because it's going to be more scalable, and it's going to be allowing for Ivanti to control a lot more of the data normalization rules and all of that kind of stuff from there. Okay, the last thing I want to kind of point out here before we switch over to the license optimizer side is this goes through and starts talking about storage spaces. So I have a storage space at my corporate office on the first floor. Within that storage space, if I were to go look at that, I would be able to start to see some things from that. I have 15 different assets that are in that storage space set from there, from desktops to laptops to some servers, even some contracts are allocated to that. We also have consumables, things like mice and keyboard and such that we want to be able to track quantities against from those details. So each storage space allows me to go through and track every interaction that we have with that. When something is checked into the storage space, when something is delivered out to somebody from the storage space, all of that then is tracked through that storage space so we can track the inventory of where things go, how they work through, and all of the different components and details associated with that. Okay, again, there's a lot more to the Asset Manager product that we haven't gone into, but this is just to say, here's some of the details that we get with that. So I want to go ahead and switch gears.
Brian, before question on the hardware still, on a Dell service tag, will ITAM reach out and get that warranty information from Dell?
That is where it's going to go through and do that with the data services, right? So the Ivanti Cloud Data Services will go through, get that information, pull that down, and work through that. So that's what all of that data analytics, asset intelligence, Ivanti Cloud configuration is working for. So now we've got License Optimizer. The Asset Manager does have the ability to track licensing in terms of a procurement and a contract to a license. It doesn't give us an effective license position, and that's where we bring in the License Optimizer. Now, I want to be very clear on this. License Optimizer is a very enterprise tool, and it has a lot of capabilities, and it's not something that just installs and gets you an effective license position. You know, it takes time and effort to build effective license position, but it does have the capability to understand things like Oracle licenses and core licensing and SQL licensing and Windows Server licensing and Adobe licensing, all these really hard license models and all the different configurations that all these vendors want to do to make it difficult to figure out where you're at a license. This tool understands all of that kind of configuration, right? So I'm going to start with, a quick view of here's the budget overview, right? To be able to go through and see how are we doing against our budget, different variable, CapEx, OpEx, different components, just a quick view of where we're at from our software spend based upon this, right? You'll see here, I can go in and look at some different dashboards, right? I can say, here's just a quick value dashboard or a standard dashboard to kind of see where we're at from different data, different compliance details along those lines is all there. So I can start to see that. Then I can come in here to our data summary. Now, our data summary is where all the information really is going to sit. And we're going to go through, and I'm going to switch us over here to the basic view. It's a little bit easier to go through and see what that looks like. And so we're going to do a reconciliation against this February 18th value. And here you're able to see all of the different vendors and how we're looking at each vendor. So you'll see at first, it's going to show me everything that I'm compliant on, right? Well, maybe I don't want to see it by everything I'm good at. Maybe I want to see it everything I'm shortfall on. Well, look, I have zero compliance on N software and 1099 Express and 1099 Pro, but most of these are very low in their configuration, and it looks like I need to reset my value from showing in pounds to showing in US dollars. I'll fix that later, but you can go through and set by shortfall, right? Show me where I'm short on different things based upon my compliance. You see here, I'm a lot short on Microsoft. 3 million pounds, which, $3 million-ish dollars along those. But I also say, where's my exposure, right? So my exposure from a percentage allows me to go through and see what's the number one cost perspectives that I have from Oracle or Adobe or Microsoft, any of those kind of things from here. I can go through and select that. So if I go in here and say, hey, let's look at Microsoft a little bit more in depth. Now I can see, not only do I able to see what's on my local installation, but I also see where I'm at from an Azure compliance as well, right? So now we go through and look at by exposure. You'll see here, I'm most at risk on the Windows Server and the SQL Server components associated with this. So as you go through and look at this, let's drill into the Windows Server, right? Now we can go through and it says all the variants of the Windows Server, all of the details in here, and we come in here and look at this, and it's mostly in Windows 2003, 2008 servers that are there. I can actually jump into that and start looking at those. And when I go to this level, it's going to go into the individual hardware assets and then say whether that individual asset is licensed or not, right? So you'll see here all the ones that are licensed versus the ones that aren't licensed, being able to show that. Now, the OSI is just the host name for that particular asset. That information is all governed and controlled up here in our hardware estate. So the hardware is where all of those assets are. I can't do software asset management until I'm doing hardware asset management. So I need to understand all of the different components from there, and you'll see here's all of those operating system instances or hardware assets. Now, hardware assets is also kind of a not correct term because we have a lot of virtual servers that are not really a hardware asset, but we still need to understand the underlying OS. And you'll see I understand hosts, clusters, virtual machines, all of that kind of stuff. It can manage and work through all of those. If we go look at one of these particular assets, it will get into the details about what kind of processor and what kind of CPU count, all of the different details in there. It will also let us see what the virtualization structure looks like for that particular component. So if we're looking at something like Microsoft cores, if we're looking at Oracle cores, all of that kind of stuff, it understands how to manage all of that from a data center licensing perspective that's there. And then from the estate management, we then match in the OS to the software that's out there, and then we bring in the entitlements. And like I said, entitlements is the ITAM term for a license, right? So an installation is actually a liability to the organization, and an entitlement covers a liability. So we have any one of these, we go through, open up one of these unmatched licenses that you would see here, and it would say, here's a metric of a per install license and all of the kind of details along those lines. And so it gets into what product it is. In this case, we're Adobe Design Studio, and then you can see the metric. You'll understand it can go through and see lots of different metrics from all kinds of different CALs and end user licenses and different components that is able to understand where it's assigned to from the business unit perspective, what's the purchasing, who it's available for, how many licenses did we purchase, all of that kind of stuff. And then that information can be matched against the hardware asset that's there and all the configuration that's behind it. And then lastly, the thing I want to show is the software library. So this software library is where we get all of the information around what's in a vendor, what product suites, what versions that are there. So if we just take a look at Adobe, for instance, now you'll notice the great thing about this, there's not all these different kinds of Adobe, there's just Adobe. And then I can go through and look within here, here's all of the products that Adobe does. Let's go ahead and say we want Adobe Acrobat Reader. So from there, then we have the edition or the version that we want to look at. Let's go ahead and look at DC, and then it will bring in all of the information associated with that, right? What's the licensing, what's the bundle, what's the suites, what's the path, all of that kind of information about Adobe Reader is here so you can control and govern exactly how it's being discovered. Is it a licensable? Is it an unlicensable product? But I just want to discover it within the organization. So this allows you to go through and govern that software library and all the details that are there. And then you run reconciliations that will compare what's discovered versus what's entitled and where we're at from an effective license position. All right, John, I'm going to stop for questions there.
Okay, will asset management allow potential users to request a license through the system?
So asset management will allow the users to request anything from the catalog, right? Now, the Asset Manager tool has the service catalog and request self-service available for customers that want to do it that way. Or you can also do it with the Service Manager platform where it can go through and do that, get approvals, do all of those kind of things. It won't automatically decrement that license from an available pool yet, but that is something that Ivanti is working on, that integration level coming between the asset and the license optimizer. Okay, these all can come together. The software library or the Ivanti License Optimizer is a cloud-only tool because it is a lot of data that has to be managed and controlled by Ivanti and all the kind of details associated with this. It's a cloud-only solution. The Asset Manager product that we talk about is an on-premise solution for anyone that gets the ELA, and then there's an optional hosting component if you want to have that hosted within the cloud from there. So ELA customers would by default get License Optimizer in the cloud and Asset Manager on-premise, and then you can get the VPN that will let them communicate in between each other and all the different kind of details associated with that. So I don't want to leave out the data analytics / asset intelligence, whatever you want to call it, right? all of this information, see the B2B connectors that there have been a couple of questions on, this is all moving to the new Ivanti data services in the cloud component where it can all be managed and controlled by them, so that if Dell goes and breaks the API or whatever we've got configured there, so that we can no longer get the warranty because they've changed their website or put two-factor authentication on or something like that, then we can go through and have that controlled and governed by the Ivanti cloud and cloud team, as opposed to having to have each individual customer go and update their individual B2B connector. So you'll see a lot more stability in the B2B connectors as it moves to the Ivanti cloud, away from the data analytics, but it's still, data analytics, asset intelligence is still part of the ELA. You still have access to all of the other great features that the data translation services and asset control are there if you want to do that as well. So I'll go ahead, close out this side of it, and open it up for some Q&A.
And feel free, to reach out to Brian Hoskins there. There's the email address. If you want to receive a more in-depth presentation, a longer, deeper dive that's more specific to your organization, feel free to give Brian either a call or shoot him an email, and we'd be more than happy to do that. A couple questions coming in. How many man hours, let's see, the data analytics part, B2B, is the only part of data analytics going to the cloud?
No, it's all going to be going to the Ivanti cloud function. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. The asset control, those kind of components are going to be there, but the B2B is the big part that's going to the Ivanti cloud, the data services.
And as far as on-site managing something like this solution, how many hours per week would you say is needed for someone to manage this?
To manage it, I guess there's two kind of questions there. To manage it as an admin, where I need to go make changes and do different things, it's going to be a fairly small component once a customer goes live. The license optimizer is going to be a little bit bigger, so probably 25% of somebody's job to keep different components associated with from an admin perspective. Now, from a user perspective, hey, I want to go in and add assets, and I want to go, link to a PO, or I want to go through and bring in a new license that we've purchased. That's going to be very dependent upon each organization, the number of assets, number of licenses, and the number of components that they're doing, because you can fill out something from an asset perspective that's just the asset, and I don't want to bring in all the other details. Or I can bring in the asset to the PO, to the invoice, to the shipment, and all of the kind of details associated from there.
Okay, and then we have a specific question about someone who's on Landesk 10.1. We have version 10.1. What is the best way to upgrade?
Probably a side-by-side migration. Depends on which operating system you're on. I don't remember which operating systems are supported for 10.1, but as you get to 2018.3, you want to get to 2016 server, which means you're probably going to do a side-by-side migration, which means install on 2018.3 on a new server, then you're going to migrate the database, upgrade the database, and then migrate the certificates over.
And then another question about upgrading from Management Suite 2016. We've purchased the ELA. The new features of Asset Manager look really good. Would like to know how the easiest and best way to upgrade.
Okay. The new Asset Manager is a completely different platform. All right. So it's not an upgrade from Landesk 2016. It's a new platform called Ivanti Asset Manager, and it's on the service management platform. So you would need to install the new platform and build that out from there. And I would recommend that customers get some professional services to help get you going along those lines, kind of move that path forward.
Okay, and then a question, when requesting assets from the service manager side, will it update the asset manager records, i.e. license quantities, etc.?
Out of the box, no. That can be built as part of your services or our services. It could go through and do that. There's an automation platform that sits below all of this that can go do things like that, right? Out of the box, that's not there yet. It is something Ivanti is going to be building in the integrations as they work that forward, but it's not there yet.
Thanks for joining us today, everyone. Brian, again, anything to say before we close up?
I know there's a lot of customers on who have already purchased the ELA. And I think there's some very exciting stuff coming from, getting some value out of that and getting some of these tools implemented for customers who haven't. If you have, a couple of things from Ivanti today, really should look at what that ELA is, because you can potentially, for a very little uplift of your current maintenance, you could move to the ELA and get a lot more value, a lot of more tools.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time, everyone, today, and we look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Please go to our website, ncsi.us, and sign up for next week's, and we'll see you for the next 5 weeks. Thanks, and have a great day.